Late one night in 2012, the Czech climber Milan Sedláček reaches the summit of Lhotse, the fourth highest mountain on Earth, 8,516 meters. The goal he had chased for years is finally his. And then he never comes back down. They find him sitting just a few meters below the highest point. What stopped him there, in the dark, no one knows to this day. Exhaustion, a single wrong step, and ahead of him lie 12 years, during which everyone who climbs Lhotse walks right past him. To understand how he ended up there, we have to go back to the beginning. The story doesn't begin in the Himalayas, but in industrial Ostrava, the Czech city of coal, steel, and factory smokestacks in the northeast of the country. Here, on the 1st of October, 1961, Milan Sedláček is born. Surprisingly little is known about his childhood, or about who he was away from the mountains. Reliable sources say almost nothing about his education or his profession. He seems to appear in this story already a grown man, in love with high places. What everyone does know is the nickname he went by in the club, Shvidri. No one explains where it came from, but it stuck for good. Sedláček belongs to the Ostrava mountaineering club SSK Vitkovice, and in everyday life, he remains a family man. In the mountains, though, he's someone else entirely, the heart and soul of any group. He's a storyteller, a singer, a guitarist, the one who keeps the whole team's spirits up in the evening tent. His friends jokingly call him the expedition's barber, and he really does cut their hair right there in base camp, at altitudes where no one even thinks about comfort. His path in the mountains is tied to one man, Leopold Šulovský, the first Czech to stand on the summit of Everest. A tight circle forms around Šulovský, and it's always the same faces: Libor Uhrer, Radovan Marek, Pavel Luptak, Marek Ojana. These aren't chance companions. These are people you trust your life to, literally on a single rope. They climb in the classic siege style. They don't storm a mountain in one push. They lay siege to it like a fortress. Step by step, they fix the ropes, haul the loads, and pitch camp after camp, higher and higher. It's a slow, stubborn method where what matters isn't speed but patience and a team you can lean on. Out of this world, a factory town, a close-knit club, a tried and tested rope team, Sedláček keeps reaching farther and higher. His eyes lift toward the 8,000ers, and an ordinary lad from Ostrava begins to measure himself against their scale. Sedláček gets his first chance in 2002 on Tibet's Shishapangma, 8,027 meters. It's the lowest of the planet's 14 8,000ers, which is why for many it becomes a first taste of true high altitude. Sedláček goes as part of the Czech expedition Himalaya 8000, together with Peter Novak and the Sherpa Lakpa Dorje. According to the available accounts, he reaches the summit without supplemental oxygen, on his own lungs alone, in air where there's nearly 3 times less of it than down below. The sources sometimes disagree on the year. Some say 2003, but most name 2002. Either way, Shishapangma becomes his ticket into the world of the Great Mountains, and the team immediately sets its sights on a summit of an entirely different order, K2. The second highest mountain on Earth is lower than Everest, but its reputation is far more terrifying. K2 is called the hardest of all the 8,000ers. Sheer walls, constant rockfall and avalanches, weather that turns in a matter of minutes. The number of people who have stood on its summit is many times smaller than those who have climbed Everest. In 2005, the Czech expedition from Ostrava makes an attempt and turns back, reaching only about 7,400 meters. 2 years later, in 2007, Sedláček returns to K2 again. This time, a team of 9 chooses one of the hardest routes up the mountain, and once again, K2 lets only some of them to the top. In that expedition, only one man reaches the summit, his friend Libor Uhrer, who becomes the second Czech in history to climb K2. Sedláček himself never reaches the highest point. Twice the hardest mountain in the world turns him back, and both times, it's not he who takes the summit, but a teammate on his rope. In the Great Mountains, this is the ordinary truth. A team's success and a personal summit are far from the same thing. Sedláček has no intention of stopping. Šulovský's team finds a new goal, Lhotse, the 4th highest mountain on Earth, 8,516 meters. They've never been on it before, and in 2010, Sedláček heads there with his usual circle, alongside Radovan Marek, Pavel Lupták, and the others. The climb goes hard. The expedition pushes up to about 7,800 meters, already higher than most of the world's summits, but several hundred vertical meters still separate them from the top of Lhotse. And it's right here that the mountain shuts the door. First, the weather turns. In the Himalayas, that means far more than rain or wind. At that altitude, bad weather means snow squalls, zero visibility, and a cold in which every extra hour out on the open slope works against you. Then comes the avalanche danger. Fresh snow settles on the steep slopes in an unstable layer, ready to break loose at the slightest shove. To climb higher would be to put the whole team in the line of fire. Sedláček and his companions make the decision that, in the mountains, is harder than any summit push, to turn around. They still have strength left, but the cost of a mistake is too high. They turn and descend, never reaching the highest point. For many, this would be just another failed season, of which the Himalayas have plenty. But for Sedláček, Lhotse becomes an unsettled debt. Those last few hundred meters seem to wait for his return. 2 years later, he comes back. May 2012. 5 Czechs arrive again beneath Lhotse, the same core team led by Sulovsky. Besides him and Sedláček, the group includes Radovan Marek, Pavel Lupták, and Marek Ojana. They climb the classic route, laid down by the first ascensionists back in 1956. Almost the entire way to the summit of Lhotse overlaps with the road to Everest, the same famous Khumbu icefall, a frozen river of shattered ice that creeps slowly along and now and then collapses, and the same high mountain cirque above it. Only high up beneath the summit, near the last camp, do the paths of the two giants split, left for Everest, right for Lhotse. But even before the real fight for the summit begins, the mountain bares its teeth. At the turn of April and May, a rock slide breaks loose right beside base camp. Pavel Lupták takes the hit. His arm is broken, and he's urgently flown by helicopter to a hospital in Kathmandu. The team loses a man before the decisive work has even started, and it loses him senselessly, not on the summit push, but in a place considered relatively safe. Danger creeps up on the others too. In late April, Sedláček climbs to the third high camp together with Marek in a fierce wind, amid stones flying down from above. At great altitude, ice and rock are constantly thawing and refreezing, and the rock breaks loose without warning. Every such trip up becomes a gamble where the stakes are too high. By the time the summit push draws near, the team of 5 has already thinned out. 1 man is gone. The rest are worn down by the brutal approaches. There's no good start to this climb. But Sedláček is once again beside the mountain that turned him away 2 years ago, and he has no intention of retreating a second time, except that on the mountain, he is far from alone. By mid-May of 2012, the entire Everest and Lhotse Massif is overflowing with people. The reason is simple and treacherous. You can only climb an 8,000er in brief windows, when the wind dies down and the clouds part. They are called weather windows. That season, the bad weather hangs on for weeks, and every expedition is forced to wait. And when a narrow band of clear days finally opens, hundreds of people, who had been languishing in the camps, surge toward the summits all at once. In those days, around 150 climbers find themselves on the 2 mountains, and roughly half of them are Sherpas, without whom almost no one here gets by. There's one route, one set of fixed ropes, and the narrow, steep sections let people through only one at a time. Real traffic jams form on them, hours-long queues of people in down suits. Standing in a line like that is dangerous in itself. All of it happens in what's called the death zone, above 8,000 meters, where the body no longer recovers but only loses strength. Every minute spent standing still is wasted oxygen from a cylinder that's already running low, and extra cold that's hard to bear. Outsiders watch what's unfolding with alarm. Reinhold Messner, the first man to conquer all 14 8,000ers, compares Everest in those days to Disneyland. His point is harsh and simple. As long as anyone who wants to can throw themselves at the highest mountains, people will keep dying. Into this crush, into this overloaded window of good weather, the little Czech team heads off for its summit push. Against the backdrop of hundreds of strangers, their own story all but disappears from view. 5 friends, 1 mountain, and a summit they failed to reach 2 years before. For the decisive push, 3 of the thinned-out team climb up: Sedláček, Marek, and Sulovsky. Their goal for that night is the 4th and final high camp, at around 7,800 meters. From here, and only from here, do climbers set out for the summit itself. There's no level ground here. The slope is too steep, and the tent platforms have to be literally hacked out of packed snow and ice. The camp already sits at an altitude where a person cannot linger long. The body doesn't rest even inside a sleeping bag, but only slowly drains. Every hour here works against you, and any night spent here is not a break, but a spending of your last reserves. It's on this very evening, on the eve of the summit push, that Sulovsky notices a troubling sign. Sedláček is barely eating or drinking. At great altitude, that's especially dangerous. Appetite and thirst vanish on their own up here, yet it's food and water that give the body the little fuel it needs to haul a person up and, far more important, to bring him back down. Without them, strength slips away quietly and fast. His partner seems weakened to Sulovsky, not in the best shape on the eve of the expedition's hardest day. As the leader and an experienced high-altitude climber, he understands all too well what this can lead to up there. And he tries to talk Sedláček out of the climb, flatly advising him not to go. But you can't make him stay. In the Great Mountains, every adult answers for his own decision, and Sedláček is no beginner being led by the hand. The summit is right there, just one day away. The final word is his. Sedláček makes the decision himself. In the morning, he will go up. Saturday morning comes, and the 3 set out from the last camp toward the top. Ahead lies the longest and most dangerous stretch of the whole climb, the final few hundred meters to the summit of Lhotse, over steep snow and rock. Every ascent of an 8,000er has an invisible enemy: time. It's no accident that climbers set out for the summit in the dark or in the early morning. You have to reach the top with a margin to spare so you can get back to camp while you still have strength and while there's still light. Experienced mountaineers set themselves a deadline in advance, an hour after which they turn back, even if the summit is already within reach. The descent from such heights in the dark, on the last of one's strength, claims more lives than the climb itself. This unseen deadline catches up with Sulovsky first. At around 8,400 meters, he stops. Only about 100 vertical meters separate him from the summit, a stone's throw by the standards of ordinary life. And yet, he turns around and heads down to wait for his teammates in camp. The leader chooses not the summit, but the return. Sedláček and Marek decide otherwise. The 2 of them keep climbing, but they go slowly, too slowly. Altitude and fatigue seem to glue every step in place, and the daylight hours slip away one after another. The mountain draws closer. The sun sinks lower. What should have ended by daytime drags on toward evening. Only late in the evening does Radovan Marek reach the summit of Lhotse first. Later still, in the thick of dusk, Milan Sedláček steps onto the highest point as well. At last, he stands where he had longed to be for so many years. But a climb that began on a clear morning has stretched across the whole day and run headlong into night. Now both men have to descend in total darkness. From the summit, Sedláček never comes back. Marek descends, his partner does not. When the survivors reach camp and report to the authorities that one man hasn't returned, the mountain already knows. Something irreparable has happened. Sedláček's body is found by another expedition. He's sitting just below the summit, with no sign of life. What exactly happened up there, in the dark, no one knows for certain. But the decisive factor, it seems, is that very lateness on the summit. By the end of the day, there's no reserve of strength or light left, and often there isn't enough of it for the descent. The official version, though it too remains only a supposition, speaks of exhaustion and a collapse of strength right near the summit. The body, pushed to the edge by altitude, cold, and hours of strain, simply gives out at some point, and a person can no longer move or warm himself. But there's another version. One of the people who later saw the body notices a strange detail. A glove is missing from Sedláček's hand. From this comes the theory that a bare hand may have slipped off the rope, and the man may have lost his balance and fallen. But that's exactly a theory, not an established fact. The truth can no longer be known for sure. No one performs an autopsy at such an altitude, and the exact cause of death can't be determined. Even the date is disputed. Some sources name the 19th of May, others the 20th. The explanation is simple. He reached the summit deep in the night, on the seam between 2 days. Years later, Leopold Sulovsky admits that he never managed to explain to himself what really happened to his friend up there, just beneath the summit. The mountain left that question unanswered. Sedláček doesn't die alone. His death falls on one of the deadliest weekends of the 2012 season. In those same overloaded days, 4 more people die on neighboring Everest. That very narrow window of good weather turns into a trap for many. The Czech press calls Sedláček the 5th victim of that weekend in the Himalayas. But from there, his story parts ways with the others. For most of those who die in these mountains, the final point is set quickly. A name, a date, a brief news item, and the memory slowly fades. With Sedláček, it's different. He remains, in the most literal sense, on the mountain, almost at the very summit of Lhotse, above 8,000 meters, right where his path was cut short. His body lies directly on the classic route to the highest point, on the one and only trodden road up. And at such an altitude there are no detours. There's a single path, a single set of ropes, and a step to the side is impossible here. From this comes a detail made all the harder by its sheer ordinariness. Every team climbing toward the summit of Lhotse after him passes right beside him. Year after year, he becomes a grim landmark for other people's expeditions, a silent reminder of how this mountain can end. Time slowly does its work. More and more snow buries him. His outlines gradually smooth over, and he seems to dissolve into the slope. Popular accounts would later keep repeating that he stayed clipped to the fixed ropes, forever tied to the route. But there's no reliable confirmation of this. It's more likely a tidy simplification. Recovering a body from such an altitude is almost impossible. Bringing one down from here is a separate deadly operation that for years on end no one simply dares to undertake. And the years go by. Seasons and expedition rosters change, new records are set on Lhotse, and he's still in the same place, a motionless point near the very summit. 1 year, another, a 5th. 12 years, and all that time, Sedláček stays beside the summit that became his last. The turning point comes in the summer of 2024. For the first time, a special expedition of the Nepalese army sets out for those who died and were left on the Great Mountains. The state takes the task upon itself. That year, the army launches a large-scale campaign to clean up the mountains. Earlier campaigns like this mostly gathered rubbish off the slopes. Abandoned tents, oxygen cylinders, scraps of rope that had buried the Himalayas over the decades. But in 2024, the military faces a heavier task. For the first time, they are to bring down the bodies of the dead from that very death zone above 8,000 meters. Over the long years, the highest mountains have turned into a place of final rest for many who never came back. Dozens of people remain lying on the slopes of Everest and its neighbors. And now, at least some of them are to be brought home. The work goes on at the very limit of human ability. The climb up there is deadly on its own, and lowering a motionless load is twice as dangerous. To bring down a single body from such an altitude takes a dozen people, relieving one another. The load is lowered meter by meter, every movement belayed, and the rescuers themselves go up on oxygen. Without it, you can't work long in that zone. Near the summit, they work mostly at night, so as not to block the narrow route by day for those climbing toward the top on their own. Bringing down each body stretches over long, grueling hours. And then, in the middle of this almost superhuman work, the very thing it was all undertaken for happens. Among the bodies brought off the mountains, the soldiers find documents, and they give the dead man his name back. It's a Czech climber who vanished here 12 years ago. The mountain finally gives up Milan Sedláček. And here the story takes an almost impossible turn. The man who brings the body down has already seen it once before, 12 years earlier, on this very same slope. His name is Repaying. He's a Sherpa who, in 2024, is 46 years old, and he's been working in the mountains since he was 20. Behind him lies an enormous wealth of high-altitude experience. 3 times he stood on the summit of Everest, and 5 times on the summit of Lhotse. The mountains are, for him, almost his whole life. And here's what ties him to Sedláček. Back in May of 2012, in those very fateful days, Repaying was leading his client toward the summit of Lhotse. And it was then that he first passed by the body of the Czech climber. Of course, he had no idea he would return here again, no longer to pass by, but to carry the dead man down. In 2024, he comes for Sedláček as part of that very army detachment. Explaining why he took on such heavy and dangerous work, he says it simply: the time has come to repay his debt to the great Himalayas, which gave him everything, his livelihood, his name, and his very life in the mountains. And this debt he repays. Milan Sedláček's body is lifted from the summit ridge and lowered meter by meter down. The descent takes more than 1 day of exhausting labor, and bad weather stretches the journey even further. But in the end, he's brought to Kathmandu. For 12 years he was part of the mountain, and now he's returned to people. The man who first met him up there, at the top, closes the circle. Only one question remains, the very one that never found an answer. What exactly stopped Milan Sedláček on the descent that night in 2012? No one still knows. The mountain gave back his body, but its deepest secret it kept to itself.